is Tactics and Tentacles. The sharp-eyed amongst you may notice that there's another head floating above mine in the stream. It is not an optical illusion, nor have I recently become more handsome. That is Rod. He is the dungeon master for the one of the rare games that I'm actually a player in, rather than the eternal game master. Always a game master, never a player. Not so when I get to play with Rod. Now, I've talked about Rod's games on here before, especially some of the occasions when my tactical acumen has allowed me to shine in the game, namely by doing something stupid like using a thief as a counter ambush assault team. Not always the best tactic. Rod is like me, former armor. I was about to say former armor, but that would be completely incorrect, and I probably just offended him because he's a former infantry NCO and knows whereof what he speaks when it comes to small unit tactics. Clearly not at my level because as a retired lieutenant colonel, I mean I'm up here, right? Right? Yeah. Nah, not really. No, Rod's done a great job, and he and I are going to talk about a recent fight that took place in his game, in which my character, Owain, the rogue who thinks he's a tank, had a very, very clearly defined end state. A baddie was going to have a knife in him. The bad guy was a local bureaucrat named Conan York, who's just a jackass, and he needed to die. And this was Owain's opportunity. So, to set the stage real quick, the sharp-eyed amongst you will note that this is a rather nicely redone map from the old Keep on the Borderlands adventure. We've been playing through that using old school rules, but under Rod's own particular campaign setting, in which it's a Central European Celtic environment, kind of accelerated after, never conquered by the Romans, I should say. So it's kind of an extrapolation of what a Celtic milieu in Central Europe would look like. I don't know, 8th, 9th century, something like that would be my guess.
Yeah, it could be 10th. We'll see.
Somewhere around there. Point being that the Romans aren't an issue. So, Rod, I'm going to turn it over to you to set the stage, and then we will start talking about how we ended up where we ended up with Owain
once again
bleeding out on the floor.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's typical for Owain, and I apologize if there's any noise in the background from the lawn crew that showed up late here. But anyway, my name's Rod. I'm a longtime player and dungeon master. I had given up the dice back in 1995. In 2019, I took them back up as a player in XO's game. And then in 2020, decided I'd like to get dungeon master again. So we're running Keep on the Borderlands under old school essentials. It's a rule set that is a retro clone of BX. And then we're old school essentials advanced, which adds some classes and some spells and some, a few combat rules, not that many. But the Keep on the Borderlands, we've really pared down the scenario. So it's about half the enemy and about a third of the Keep inhabitants. So the Keep only has about 80 regulars, supplemented by 50 militia for reasons we won't go into because it will get too long. Anyway, the Keep on the Borderlands, we've been playing this for 26 sessions, which equates to about 18 game days worth of activity. And the current leadership of the Keep has gotten frustrated with the slow progress that's going on with the Caves of the Chaos cleanup. So they put all of the pieces on the battlefield, took the militia on the right flank, took the regulars on the left flank.
And the dog on the
dogs
taking up the rear.
Yeah. Anyway, so right flank militia anchored on the road so they don't get lost. Left flank regular troops. They roll up to the edge of the Keep, reassemble into assault teams. The plan was the militia was going to take on caves D, E, and F, which turns out are interconnected. They did not know that. And then the regulars were going to take on caves J and K. They had a real milk run. The militia got their asses handed to them. Of the 50 militia that went in, 35 were KIA, the other 15 were missing in action. As it turns out, most of them were wounded, and all of them were captured. They ran into a really hardened force of hobgoblin regulars that were commanded by somebody that's tactically and technically proficient, who managed to know himself, the enemy, the terrain, and managed to create an encirclement, creating In old school, you've got morale failures. So the militia pretty much got mopped up. The Hobgoblin leader took the prisoners, relocated them to the Bugbear Cave, which the PCs have never been to. He did that for a couple of reasons, two of which are the fact that it's a smaller complex that he knows he can secure with his now substantially reduced guard force. And second, there are two slave pens in that cave that are sufficient to secure 15 prisoners.
I noticed you managed to work several
on,
of the 11 leadership principles into your discussion there already.
I don't think I can do that anymore. I'm not board certified.
I heard technically, tactically proficient, know yourself, seek self-improvement. I'm like, oh, it's a flashback to OCS here.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you've got me in flashback mode. But the essential thing was that the Keep said, hey, we're going to pay the ransom because they let go one prisoner with a ransom demand. The Keep said, no way. We're going to send out Conan York and his 6 escorts, and we're going to supplement those with the PCs, and they're going to go out and do a quick raid and bring back as many prisoners as they can alive. The only problem with that plan is PCs absolutely hate Conan York and his escort. The PCs got some intel from the released prisoner. They also have the capability. They got like a crude map out of him too, a description of what was going on over there. And they also had a couple assets in their back pocket. They had a couple potions of gaseous form and suspect they have another one of invisibility or two. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, XO.
Excellent. So, from what Rod just described, you can see that our party, conducted a map reconnaissance. We identified intelligence sources and used them to answer priority intelligence requirements that we had about. Oh, we just lost Rod. Well, I'll just keep going. No worries. We used them to answer priority intelligence requirements that we had about the caves. Here we go. He's back. We had 2 desired end states. One, rescue the hostages, of course. The other one was Conan York in a body bag, or the old school rules Dungeons & Dragons equivalent of a body bag. For a variety of reasons, but Owain, my character, had repeatedly said, I'm going to stick a knife in Conan York and make it stick. So, with that in mind, our initial goal, phase 1 of the operation, infiltrate the caves. Phase 2 of the operation, identify location of Conan York and his immediate bodyguard, kill him, and then rescue the hostages. It didn't quite go perfectly. I'll just say that.
I wasn't going to mention the looting, but maybe you'll touch on that.
Well, looting is important, and you got to pay the bills, right? But definitely, I mean, killing Conan York was top of my list, at least. So this first map you see here is the state of affairs at the beginning of the module, or beginning of this action sequence, I guess would be the best way to put it, before we went too crazy with entering into the Bugbear's Cave. You can see the Bugbear forces are right up here in the upper left corner. Chieftain, Bugbear husband, guard force. Excuse me. You can see 40. Are these prisoners down here in 40? My eyes. No. Prisoners are over here in 41. It's a little teeny tiny.
Prisoners are in 40 and 41.
40 and 41? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be, at phase 0, before phase 1 kicks off, and Conan York has not yet entered the cave at this point in time, correct? So
Conan York's forces actually arrived on scene slightly. Well, you're correct. They did not arrive on scene until after you conducted a Haiti recon.
Okay. So, but I want to foot stomp something there. We sought out information about where we were going to try and develop intelligence about the situation we were walking into. Compare that to my Age of Worms campaign, where Rod is a player, and a lot of times they just kind of blitz into a new place with no idea what was going on, and There's a reason why the Age of Worms campaign is over. I'm going to flip to the next map. So here we see the situation unfolding as Conan York and his forces have entered the battle space. You can see that Actually, Rod, I'm going to have you walk us through this if you don't mind. You know this map better than I do.
Sure. There may be a little background noise, but hopefully it won't be bad. The hobgoblins have their forces down 3 different corridors. Obviously, they've got a guard force down in the south to keep the prisoners secure and off the prisoners if anybody does attempt to rescue.
So these guys,
they've got a Thal.
So this is like a blocking force here in 39 then, right?
Yeah, blocking force in 39, and then there was a goblin with a knife in 41 off prisoners, right?
Yep.
As a last line.
Yep. Oh, I remember that well. That was a dramatic moment.
But, yeah, it's a good thing Sean got the drop on that one. Up the upper right-hand corner where it says slope, there was one Thal and another hobgoblin guard. The Thal is kind of the tank here because it regenerates. It has 2 claw attacks, and both those claw attacks can do paralysis. So it's really the fixing force, right? So if somebody does try to go do the rescue in 39, they're supposed to muck up works. Yep. And then the hobgoblin wives and the chieftain on the left, they've all got ranged weapons, so they can bump down to 35 and start shooting down that hallway and create a real problem, which is where they're about to be in this session coming up this week.
Let me jump in here for a second with a couple points there. One, the history of the Thal, which is from a typo. A Thal is a combination, what is it, a troll, ghoul, and something else.
A troll and a ghoul.
Yeah. Troll and a ghoul. And it originally came from a typo in an old module where somebody mistook the G, dropped the G and stuck a TR in place and created a whole new monster. But Rod alluded to them as the fixing force. Now, in previous sessions of this, I've told you the fixing force is kind of like the hand searching in the dark. There we go. The hand searching in the dark, right? Your eyes are closed. You're fighting in a darkened room. The fixing force goes out. It makes contact with the guy you're fighting in the darkened room, right? Grabs onto him. He can't move. And then you bring in the hammer, right? The backhand, the right cross. You bring it in, whammy. So, when you put that into a Dungeons and Dragons milieu, a creature that can cause paralysis in many ways is the ultimate fixing force because he reaches out, he causes paralysis, boom. That's pretty fixed, right? You're paralyzed, you can't move. You have no mobility. Well, frankly, you have no ability to react, period. But now everything has to move around you. Make sense? Yes.
Makes sense to me. Although, I think it situation depends which ones made contact with the enemy first.
Mm-hmm. So, absolutely. Go ahead and you want to finish walking us through this segment, and then I'll talk about what was going on off screen?
No, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
Conan York already got tangled up there at the end of the hallway. His forces, though, did make the turn and push on down into 39. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, one PC who was able to get back into gaseous form got down into 41 and stopped that goblin from wrecking the prisoners, thus ensuring that 40 and 41 were going to be able to be secured.
Yes. And what would I'm trying to remember how Sun Tzu used to put it: the ordinary and the extraordinary force. And when Sun Tzu called it the ordinary and the extraordinary force, he meant something very similar to a fixed force and a maneuver force, a fixing force and a maneuver force. But in this case, we literally had an extraordinary force, a guy in gaseous form who went ahead of us. Much like, I can reference some old Russian operational doctrine here. Way back in the day, the Russians had what they called operational maneuver detachments. And what these they weren't special forces, they were special purpose forces. A combined arms force that was designed to go out and achieve special objectives in advance of a maneuvering Russian element. Their job may be to do something like secure a critical river crossing or attack critical assets, NATO assets, or well, in the Cold War, NATO assets, but some sort of specialized mission that would require them to maneuver ahead of the main Russian body. If you're really, really interested in getting in deep into the history of U.S. Army tactics and why we ended up here, with the idea of with the latest evolution of, I don't even remember what we're calling it nowadays. There's been so many versions of it in my time, but this kind of super evolved airland battle doctrine that we use now. I just showed my age by calling it airline battle doctrine. All this is, we think of it as derived from the Germans. It's not. It's actually derived from the Russians. The Germans learned it from studying the Russians. So anyway, OMD, Operational Maneuver Detachment, goes out, seizes special objectives ahead of a main maneuver force. And that's what our gaseous form friend was doing. There was a specific objective that we needed seized, the hostages, before we could really had freedom of maneuver to do whatever else we needed to do. So in the meanwhile, Halflet was, I had to think of his name in this game. Halflet Moon was sneaking up there. He was in gaseous form. The rest of us were maneuvering through the underground to get to the Bugbear lair, the Bugbear / Hobgoblin lair. And we were doing it very sneaky Pete, my thief, Owain, the thief who thinks he's a tank. I think I made more hide and shadows and more move silently rolls in that session than any other time.
That was the most thief-like I have seen you be, and it was all in the cave that was completely empty, so none of the rolls mattered.
Yeah, well, that was me. I was showing caution for once. Well, the idea was Owain wanted to sneak up and get as close as he could before triggering any sort of alarms. Again, Owain was trying to set the tempo. And once again, I'm going to read you guys my definition of tempo. Not the doctrinally approved definition of tempo. This is my definition of tempo based upon 30 years of experience. Tempo is not about moving faster than the enemy. It's about imposing the pace of events on the enemy. Tempo leads to initiative, which means you're dictating events to the enemy. If you can gain surprise, you're going to have tempo. If you can move faster than the enemy can react, you're going to have tempo. If you're moving slower than the enemy wants you to move, you're going to have tempo on your side. It's about controlling the pace of events to your best advantage. Oh, look, we're on the map with Owain. So, yeah. Through a variety of maneuverings and maneuvers and changing caves and coming in right through the frickin' front door. It happens. We came in through, right in through the front door at H, and we saw Conan York and his immediate bodyguard engaged with, were they engaged with hobgoblins or bugbears? I can't recall.
All the bugbears are dead.
Okay, they were engaged with the hobgoblin force, and Owain, being the cunning character he is, made a sneak attack on Conan York. Unfortunately, I had the worst possible roll at the best possible moment, and I rolled a 5, and in old school rules, a sneak attack, or a backstab, as it was called back then, would give you a +4 to hit, and then double damage. The +4 to hit was not enough. I should also point out that I was only running around with 3 hit points at the time, because I like to really play things on the edge, and Conan York's riposte did me in. Owain, how often will you be unconscious?
You would be unconscious once a session on average,
yes.
Maybe twice. I haven't run the numbers, XO.
I'm going to pause here and point out something about the way Rod DMs. Rod, due to his technical background, runs every off-screen encounter between NPCs through the computer to figure out what will happen. When he was quoting those casualty figures earlier, those were legit fights that took place. He ran them. I mean, it's amazing. He does not do the big, big hand, little map, hand wave thing that I'm constantly doing of, and then this happened.
My, my Sunday mornings are boarding XO. So I get up early and I run a combat,
When I first started GMing again, I would slide into the seat with zero prep, like 1 minute before the game went live, and be like, I don't know where we are. Then I got a little more anal attentive. But it's about where you want to put your time as a game master. Like I spend most of my time on plotting, and of course you put in probably far more hours than I do. But yeah,
I mean, the way the story is driving itself makes it easy. It only takes me about 15 minutes to plot some ideas out, and then what I do is I go when I'm walking around the neighborhood, take my daily walk, then I think about it.
Yeah, that's a lot of what I do. Walking the dog, thinking about gaming. And poor Ginger, she gets like these ideas bounced off her all the time. Her eyes glaze over every time I'm like, so this is what's going on in my game right now, and I'm thinking about doing this. And she's just like, oh God, shut up about Dungeons & Dragons, Call of Cthulhu, whatever else you're playing this week. Anyway, love her to death. So, and then the rest of the party showed up, and we had a pretty much a Deus Ex Machina in the form of Half-Lit Moon appearing out of his gaseous state and casting web on Conan York and his minions.
That was actually the retainer, Thon Catalan.
That was Thon who did
the
that?
elven advisor from. Yeah, it was Thon.
He's
got 3 spells, and that's his most effective one.
So I'm hoping that next session you guys bandage Owain up enough so he's conscious again and he can slit Conan York's throat himself. But
yeah, the problem is because you're webbed up, and those webs are really sticky. I was looking at the rulings on those. It's going to be interesting what happens the first couple of rounds next session.
As long as Conan York dies, I am happy. So
complications are coming.
Complications are coming. Important point here. Owain did a lot of things very right in this session, right? Strong, I'm his player. We showed strong tactical acumen. I, chose an attack from a flank. I had surprise. I had tempo. I had initiative. But everything on my side. But luck went against me. And that's the way real combat works. You got everything going on your side. Everything's working. And that critical part fails. Or Private Snuffleupagus trips with his finger on the trigger and his weapon off safe and lets off a round right as you're moving up onto the safe house. Or, I don't know, the brigade assistant S2 is a dumbass and leaves his carbine in the back of the Humvee right when the IED driver's coming up, and the guy, the assistant brigade S2, tries to pot the fellow with a 9mm that then jams. That story was awfully specific.
or XO, you plan this thing with your colleagues, and the on crew shows up late, and they decide to do all of their work in front of your office when you're trying to record.
Yep. So. You can't control for everything, and sometimes things just go south. And I rolled a 5 when I really needed to roll a 10, and yeah. So that sums it up. This was
friction. I think that Clausewitz dude called it.
Yeah, friction. Yeah, sheer dumb luck. How did Clausewitz put it? In warfare, all things are easy, but the simplest things are hard. No, all things are simple, but the simplest things are hard. Something along those lines. One day I'm going to market a Clausewitz quote of the day calendar. I'm going to sell it at West Point, and I'm going to be a millionaire.
Joe has thoughts about that.
Yeah. So that is our analysis of this fight. This was the first time I've had a guest on the show. I hope you guys enjoyed Rod. I would love to bring people on here again because I think this is much better as a conversation rather than a long ass lecture from me with me waving my big hand at the little map and trying to remember the fact that the camera's over here and you can't necessarily see my hands. So, any last thoughts before we call it for the night, Rod?
No, it's been a blast. I'm sorry that I was looking off in the distance every once in a while, thinking evil thoughts about how I wish that dude was in my campaign so I could get some payback. Anyway, I'll see you later this week, Exo. Thank
All
you
right.
so,
No,
so
thank you
much
for coming on.
having
And everybody, thank you for watching. Appreciate it. And have a good night. See you guys next Monday.
See you.